everybody, for joining us at our first and hopefully last virtual banquet. Just a couple of ground rules tonight. No problem if y'all eat, drink, and enjoy in general, have some music, what have you, but do have yourself muted if you're not, officially speaking or asking a question at the presentation at the end of things. We will have a little break before our keynote speaker goes on at 8:15. So let us get on then with our year in review, because it was quite a year.
You're not kidding.
All right. Thumbs up, gang, if y'all can see that. Excellent. Thank you, Jennifer. Okay. So 2020. This was the year that was. Now, some good things happened. For one, we finally had something that many of us have been wanting for a long, long time, which is not a great comet, capital G, capital C, but a very good comet in Neowise that kept us entertained for weeks on end. Many of our members, including, we've got a picture here from Dale Hollenbaugh, took amazing pictures. Amazing pictures that will be, some will be gracing our calendar, some enlivened the breaks in our meetings. And generally, we had a wonderful time appreciating this comet as it moved and evolved, and it was definitely one of the best things this year. We also had a bonanza of amazing conjunctions. We had Venus visiting the Pleiades, as shown in this shot by Jonathan Cade. We had Jupiter grazing Pluto and then settling in for the close embrace that it's currently enjoying with Saturn. So we had conjunctions at dawn, conjunctions at dusk. So it was a really good year for that. And of course, the greatest conjunction of all is coming up on the 21st. We had an opposition of Mars that wasn't ruined by dust storms the way the last two were. The solar cycle picked up again after several dull years. Betelgeuse intrigued us by dimming sharply and then rebounding. Minor meteor showers put on unexpectedly good displays. And there's even a total solar eclipse coming up on Monday, which I don't think any of us will be able to see it in person, but we will be able to see it thanks to live streaming. 2020 offered us astronomically virtually everything except a close supernova. And it denied us the chance to share it communally amongst ourselves at Stargate or any other star party, or to share it with the public, which was deeply frustrating to, I'm just going to say everyone. We also had a hard loss early on this year in the sudden passing of Pat Brown. Pat was our Ace of Outreach Service Award winner several years ago. He was a fixture at Stargate open houses and participated in far-flung events like our annual trip down to Crosswinds Marsh Hobby Day. Sitting at my PST in the marsh definitely won't be the same without him. So that was sad. But the club endures, as we have for 59 years and counting, even if our meetings, our outreach, and even the 50th anniversary Stargate picnic all moved into the virtual realm this year. On the bright side, we picked up some new friends who could not have participated at Cranbrook and Macomb, but have joined us through the magic of the internet. And we were able to keep up our hectic schedule of 3 original presentations a month. So thanks to all of you who presented this year. I've got everybody in alphabetical order, starting with Dave Bailey. Short talks, long talks. We had a great variety of physics, history, news, observing, doing your own science. So it was a really great year overall. Members, academics, national names, you name it, we were able to offer it. And we revived our format of a great debate, this time on the topic of whether or not it is worthwhile to send people to Mars. As is the case with the debate, we presented arguments and didn't necessarily come to a conclusion, but we had a good time, and it was good to revisit the debate format. And of course, I'd like to thank everybody who helped keep the club going this year, from the snack donors in our handful of meetings in person in January and February and March, to our In the News presenters, to our special interest group chairs, people like Bill Beers and Dale Teamy working to give us another splendid calendar, Ken Burton stepping up as he always does to run the annual election from a virtual podium this year. Our wonderful W.A.S contributors, both the special editions and the ongoing columns, like Rick Hill and now David Levy with their monthly columns. Many of you transitioned to virtual outreach, either on behalf of the club or with GLAC, to represent the W.A.S at Astronomy at the Beach in its online form. And I cannot thank you all enough. And of course, special thanks to the board that helped steer our ship of state during this most unusual year. Dr. Dale Parton kept us supplied with quality presenters. Riyad Mahdi maintained an often lonely vigil at Stargate, making sure that everything was in place even when we couldn't access it as a group. Glenn Wilkins set a new standard for accurate and timely minutes. Mark Jacobison kept a close eye on the bank accounts. Bob Tremblay was instrumental in seeing Astronomy at the Beach survive for another year. Jonathan Cade wrangled and troubleshot every digital thing imaginable with the assistance of Dale Teamy, our WASP editor. Thank you all. We'll miss Glenn and Mark and Jonathan as they leave the board, but we have another splendid board coming on with some returning veterans, Mark Kedzier, Dale Teamy, and new face Adrian Bradley as treasurer. So normally we would all go out in the hall and take a fancy group photograph of us in our finery. This time I think we'll have to settle for a Zoom screenshot during the break, but thank you again, and it's been a great deal of fun this year, despite everything. Being on the board is an experience, and this incoming team, I am really excited as we hopefully transition back to in-person meetings. And now, I'd like to take a few moments to acknowledge people who really stood out this year, making this August Society the special institution it has been for so many years. We have numerous service awards named for members who have passed on in tribute to what they represented and what they meant to the club. The Bob Watt Award was created to honor people who have done great do-it-yourself astronomy projects in the spirit of Bob, whose hands-on projects included building eyepieces, grinding mirrors, as well as mentoring people on how to use telescopes. And in keeping with the digital transformation the club has undergone this year, the board presents the 2020 Bob Watt Award to Dale Hollenbaugh, whose relentless pursuit of better astroimaging has stood out this year as something completely in keeping with the spirit of the Bob Watt Award, the tinkering, the never quite satisfied, the always pushing the boundaries to wring the best out of equipment, albeit in the form of software tweaks instead of, a toolbox. So Dale never stops asking questions, pooling resources, striving for better images. The W.A.S has reaped visual rewards from his quest. Congratulations, Dale. You have definitely made an impact, and we look forward to seeing where you keep going from here with the pursuit of astroimaging and getting everything absolutely perfect. Thank you. Dale, if you are there and can unmute. He's on YouTube. Okay, I understood. That is, unfortunately, YouTube is not interactive. All right, next award. The Blaine McCullough Award honors new members who dive headfirst into the club and members who recruit and engage and retain members to keep the club healthy. So Blaine rose from a newcomer. He was the cousin of a long-term member, Frank McCullough, to club president within a few short years. He's also credited with keeping the open house tradition alive at Stargate during what were difficult times for the club. He'd go out there if nobody else would, and, well, if you do a thing, you lead by example, people will follow. And open house is still a tradition to this year because he wouldn't let it die. So, this year, the board presents the Blaine McCullough Award to Adrian Bradley. Adrian is not new to astronomy, as he's been a member of the University Lowbrows, and he took over as GLAC president this year. As a former GLAC president, gotta salute him for that. But he worked tightly with the Warren Club to make Astronomy at the Beach 2020 happen as a virtual event. And he dove headfirst into us, joined us for our meetings, signed up as a member, presented the news, graced us with his astro images and digital art, and became, in short order, a part of our community, in addition to being one of the key figures in keeping astronomy at the beach alive. And then, after the board decided he was already the runaway contender for the McCullough Award, he outdid himself and he up and ran for treasurer. So congratulations, Adrian. Wow, you blew us away this year. And the Larry Kalinowski Award honors members who have become a part of the long-term and essential infrastructure of the club. The way Larry himself impacted everything from the discussion group and the Observing Awards program to the WASP, where his Astro Chatter column was a regular feature. Newcomers who have never had the privilege to meet Larry may recognize his name from our Kalinowski Kula reflector at Telescope. But Larry was an indispensable man, and it was a pleasure to have gotten to know him at the when I first joined. So, how do you honor him? Well, we've got some people who have carried on his legacy to a phenomenal degree. Doug Bach, like Larry, has been a mainstay of the club for decades. He already has a string of awards and honors to his credit. The archives of the W.A.S list long gone categories like the Ken Wilson Award, the Comet Halley Award, recent recipient of the Bob Watt Award for his DIY Northern Cross Observatory. It is hard to summarize all that Doug has done for and with the W.A.S and for and with astronomy in his time. I cannot attempt to. I can't do it justice. But this year, in addition to everything else, Doug graciously provided the Warren Astronomical Society with the platform we needed to make our transition to virtual meetings as we went from Cranbrook and Macomb to Webex and Discord. His Northern Cross Observatory now hosts our virtual open houses. He's been essential in making sure our meetings are broadcast and archived on YouTube. We could not have managed the transition smoothly without Doug's cool-headed competence and dogged dedication supporting us. Congratulations, Doug, and thank you. And you may say anything you like, sir.
Well, I'm speechless, actually. I thank you very much, and it's my pleasure to serve in any way that I can and are capable for this club. And I've enjoyed it. It's been a lifelong membership that I've enjoyed since I was a teenager. So thank you, Diane. I appreciate it very much.
We appreciate you, and this was absolutely the least we can do after all you've done for us. So, our award winners, ladies and gents. Another excellent year with incredible performances and dedication from some incredible people. And like to give us a chance to decompress, unwind, get the board together to take some pictures or screenshots, as the case may be. And and any of you who wish to offer your encomia to our wonderful recipients, we have our keynote presentation coming on at 8:15, so we've got a bit of time to congratulate our winners and decompress. Thank you all.
So I just joined. I see that I've been given an award. I missed it. Can you recap what that is?
Absolutely. I can send you the text.
I thought the banquet was next week, and then I got the email. I was like, oh, man, I'm missing it.
Oh, we saw you on YouTube. Okay, we thought you were watching the YouTube broadcast. Yes.
Actually, I logged into YouTube so I could scroll back. I can go back in time and forward in time, like that Star Trek episode.
Yeah, so you got our Bob Watt Award for your not just imaging, but the intense dedication to the craft of astro imaging that you've displayed. The physical awards, we will find a way to get them into the hands of our recipients. So.
Wow, thank you, fantastic.
Yes, congratulations to everybody. Let me disconnect the keynote so I can see all the wonderful chatting that's happening.
Oh, Adrian is with us now.
Yeah, contrary to popular belief, I did not go out chasing auroras, but the trip did kind of wipe me out a little bit because I stayed in hopes that I would see something, and in frustration, I took all those shots that I posted to the Facebook page because I was leaving with something. So that's why I'm dressed as a Wolverine instead of something festive. I kind of woke up and went, I need to get into this banquet. So it was that was kind of crazy, but it was fun. As you saw, I had some success when I shot at Orion, so I was very happy with what I did get, and it was beautifully clear once the clouds went away.
Adrian, did you catch that you won an award?
I just caught it.
This is how people win awards. You are so dedicated that you're out trying to chase the sky and attend a banquet simultaneously.
I almost did that, but after the forecast for seeing aurora went down, um, I just tried to get a little bit of sleep instead before I went out. But that's awesome. That looks like a nice big telescope Blaine McCullough used to have.
We actually own it now. The club owns it. We were able to obtain it after his untimely passing, and it's at Stargate.
Okay, it reminds me a little bit of the 61 that you also were able to own, and I'm very grateful that you are keeping that 61 alive. So I dedicate this award winning to the late John Coslin, whom I from the Lowbrow team, whom I loved going over to his house, loved doing um, astronomy with. We saw Pluto. I think I saw it. And there we had it. It was a staple thing of the Lowbrows to do, to go over his house, observe. Neighbors would come over. We would talk with the neighbors. His untimely passing, as well as some, sounds like Blake McCullough had an untimely passing as well. So I feel honored to be keeping their spirit alive with doing as much astronomy as I can. This is I forget what year it is, my 5th year in doing organized astronomy at all. And I love it, obviously. So thank you all for this award. I really appreciate it.
You are very
Adrian,
welcome.
congratulations, Adrian. You are the best photographer I've ever seen. I love all the pictures you and well-deserved award, Adrian. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. That is not a lie. I mean, there are some great photographers here. Bill Beers, I forgot to mention you last time. There are a number, Doug Bach, and I'm looking at the screen at some photography that's behind you, Paul. And I do not take that lightly, because all of you had influence. I know I mentioned to you before, Dave. I will keep taking pictures, not only because of your ringing endorsement, but I love it, and I feel I still have a bit of a ways to go. And so thank you for that. And I can share I don't know if this is the right time to do it, but I can share a couple of pictures if this is the right time. That I did take last night.
That sounds good.
You know what, they're right here, so I can go ahead and
just before we do that, we're kind of running out of time for raffle submissions. So if you would like to enter the door prize drawing, please email raffle@warrenastro.org right away. I'm gonna cut it off at about 8:15, so you still have 20 minutes, but I'm gonna.
What is it? Raffle at Warren Astro?
Yeah, just raffle@warrenastro.org. You don't need any special text or anything. I just need your email, and we have one prize that is local only, so probably couldn't be received by anybody joining way out of town, but we'll make a reasonable effort to get it to anyone close to town.
Okay, so yeah, I sent that email. So, two, let's see, we'll try and keep this really, really, really short. But what I did while, let's see, I think, yep, went to the lighthouse. That's the area where I expected to see some auroral activity. No such luck. I think light. And so this one, I started to see stars, and I go, ooh, it's gonna break up. And I stayed around and took a few more pictures, long exposures.
Great photo nonetheless.
Yeah.
Was that tonight?
How that was last night at this Point of Bark lighthouse. I did everything but walk up to this lighthouse. Yeah. Taking a long exposure.
You be back by then if it was tonight.
Yeah.
Do you have any in pure black and white? That would be
this
black and white.
This is as black and white as I got. And actually, well, yeah, I messed around with colors. Looking the other way. I think this is Canada.
Adrian, where is the lighthouse?
The lighthouse is right on the tip of the thumb. If you imagine looking at your thumb, the lighthouse is, if you go to the right upper tip of the thumb, you get to that lighthouse right there. There's also Port Crescent State Park, which I went there as well and saw how murky it was. Here
I was going to say, is that Taos on the horizon, or is it Canada?
It could be either one. That's the first time there.
Across the lake, and you can, if you look north, you can see the lights of Alpena.
I never did wrap myself around. Yeah, I never wrapped myself around the tower. Well, I saw Ryan peeking out, and whenever there were sucker holes, there were just the sucker holes. I said, "Oh, I can tell this place is dark." These are
that's my go-to spot for looking for northern lights. That's a good spot, Adrian. Point off
the one at yeah, I like it. I plan on going back when the weather's a lot better. I didn't color correct a lot of this because that red light is there. This is where I want to go around here and go behind the lighthouse to look north.
Yeah, I went up looking north. You could see the Milky Way, naked eye there. It's dark.
Yeah. In fact, I'll get to where
to the tip of the thumb. There actually is an internet. I don't think it's an internet.
Yeah,
it's a dark
place. That's this place. That's this place where I took.
Okay.
This is, I think it's still Lake Hudson at this point.
Looking at
this is you looking overlooking Lake Hudson. This is. Yeah, Dale. This is the place.
Okay. Yeah, the light pollution map for that is not as good. Point of Arcs is slightly better, but this one promotes itself as a dark sky, which is good too. You know, because it draws in people for that reason.
That's fair. So it's here, the beach area, and Chris, I gave you permission to annotate. This is where the Dark Sky Park is. It's a little, it's somewhere in this park, the other side of the dunes. If I still allowed you, like off over here somewhere is a Dark Sky Park, and that's
okay. I've not actually visited that. I'll have to check that out. I'd like to go to
Yeah.
the Son of Arts. It's a little bit closer. You probably drove right by my house to get there.
Just a reminder, our keynote speaker should be joining us shortly, so if you want to take a bio break, this is the time. Carry on,
let
gentlemen.
me quickly, let me quickly go through this. That's how dark it is out there. This side of the road, I'd finally gotten away from the fog and the clouds, and I looked up and I said, take advantage of this. I took the chance, pulled off to the side of the road, and I set up. That's iPhone 12 Pro, and it's the first time I've gotten that many stars with an iPhone, so that gives you any idea. There's my DSLR. It was on top of the truck, handheld.
Okay.
It did about a 5-second exposure. I've seen it do longer.
Okay.
Yeah, this is let me get so for reference of how dark it is up there, this was a 62-second exposure. You can start to see Barnard's Loop and some of the nebulosity here, the nebulosity around Alvatac in this area on a 62-second exposure. In the overdone it category, this 120 seconds, and it's a mess. Admittedly, I have the that I saved in Photoshop. I'm gonna try again, but just with a non-modded camera, Barnard's Loop showed up. There's the witch head right there. All of the whole molecular complex showed up with 120-second exposure. There's the Winter Way, the Rosette. I overdid this one, so it turned to a bit of a mess. This one might be a little bit. This one's a little bit better. Without a modded camera out there, you get all of this information sucked into your camera with 120-second exposure. It's nice and dark. With a 90-second exposure and a little bit of processing, that goes up, and I hope it does quickly.
Adrian, you know it's dark out there when you can get a shot of the witch head after 2 minutes, so you know it's a dark area. Because that's a dim one.
Yeah, this
I've not seen that one yet.
This is 90 seconds. No, this is 64 seconds. ISO 6400 f5.6, and I got that. I got all of that. Got them here. I'm pretty sure this is a Geminid, and Dave, if you're watching, from the location of these, would you say that these are Geminids? I'm sure that maybe a satellite here too. This would be a Geminid, and maybe even these.
I don't see it right here. We certainly are in the Geminid time. So, in fact, I saw the night before last a bright Geminid just after Gemini came up. So that quite possibly is, but I'm afraid I can't see it on the picture.
Yeah,
it's a beautiful picture, by the way.
Yeah, it's below. And I got one more picture to share before I'm done. Two. It's below it's below Orion's belt, and Orion was standing up south when where I see this. It's a telltale sign of a meteor where it's gradually getting brighter. Hopefully I'm not wrong, because I'm usually the street. Well, I was tracking, so
certainly not wrong, but I just don't see it.
Yeah. So with 90 seconds, with 90 seconds,
Adrian, I
that's
don't
what
think
I
you're
got.
displaying the latest photo. We're still on the 122nd. We don't see any streaks.
Ah,
Did something not get through?
oh, darn. Let me share.
Did anybody see the Northern Lights tonight?
No, I think it ended up
No.
being a lot less. I think it ended up being a lot less bright than originally hoped. They radically revised down the predictions. So
Yeah. Let's see if I can do. Yeah, and then now it's not letting me share. Yeah, I wanted to share
no,
the final picture of the Orion Nebula, the Running Man in GC 1977. And in 4243. What I got in 90 seconds, that's I wanted to share. It's let's see, it's just not letting me. So what I'll do is I'm gonna log out back in and real quickly see if that works. And then I'll be done. So give me a second here.
it's always funny what technology does to you. Story of my life.
I see you've got the flocculent galaxy behind you now,
I
John.
do. Who needs a WebEx virtual background? Analog methods are best. Oh no, it's happening to me too.
I've got the Newtonian style telescope behind me. Our logo, 3D.
Yeah, I was gonna say it looks like our logo.
It is. It's the same. I mean, it's a reproduction of the telescope that inspired our logo.
But it's facing the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Just turn it around. It'd be perfect.
Yeah, but the eyepiece is on this side.
Yeah, to you it is, but to us it's backwards.
Well, the logo, the eyepiece is on top.
Yes.
Well, fair enough.
Just pretend that WebEx flipped it.
Brother Guy's telescope is pointing the right way.
Aha! Our speaker has arrived.
Howdy.
Hello, Brother Guy. Thank you for joining us tonight. I will share this with y'all for 1 second.
Well,
oh yeah.
Are we
Hello,
gonna
brother
get
guy. It's good to see you here.
Adrian,
Right.
did you have one more thing to show us before we go back to the normal order of business?
I think we lost him.
I think we did too.
You guys ought to be able to hear me now.
We can hear you.
Yep. I got one more thing and then I will get out of everyone's way. Let's see if this works. I'm just going to share my screen. Yep. And that's what I wanted to share. It was just, it was a 90-second shot of M42 processed with Photoshop and Lightroom. It's an awful lot of detail to get in 90 seconds. So imagine if I can get some subs of it. Now, of course, trapezium's blown out, and the stars weren't quite perfectly tracking, but they were close. That's the best Running Man I've ever gotten. I have a star tracker. Yeah, it's from Skywatcher, and yep, and polar aligned it to the best of my ability. I'm off on the side of the road. I'm not completely level. And I had a heavy lens on it. So I was probably at its weight limit. In order to track with the lens that I used, I would have needed to use the equatorial piece that comes with it with the weight that would have tracked a bit better. I think I was just using the ball-headed mount mounted onto the lens. So, but still 90 seconds, as dark as it was out there, and that's what I got. So there's a lot of good data to get.
Very nice, Adrian. Good job.
Yes.
Thank you. There's the belt region. And yeah, so there's a lot of data that you can get with skies like this. So I want to go back. So
Adrian,
there you go.
Question for you. Did you take that photo at, was it Port Austin? Did you take it there or by your house?
No, it was near Port Austin. Yeah, I would say I had driven about maybe 20 minutes south of Port Austin before I just looked up and said, okay, this is a place I'm just going to stop. It wasn't too busy, but there were people, every maybe 15 minutes, someone would drive back and forth. I just got out of the truck and went for it, and ended up getting those images. So it was a beautiful night, and I wasn't gonna miss getting something. So it made the trip worthwhile, even though I got in at 5 a.m.
Yeah,
All right.
Beautiful.
Yes, thank you. And now as we're drawing towards 8:15, I would like to yield not to our presentation chair as I normally would, but to our outreach chair, Bob Tremblay, to introduce tonight's very special keynote speaker.
All righty. Is this thing on?
Yes.
All righty. You want to start right now? Still got a couple minutes till 8:15.
However you want to do it. I just want to make sure everybody's in
right
their seat and ready to roll.
All right, so I'll start. Tonight's speaker is Brother Guy Consolmagno. Brother Guy, my wife and I share a large number of mutual friends within the science fiction community. I met Brother Guy at a science fiction convention sometime in the 1980s, and at the time, Brother Guy was curator of meteorites at the Vatican Observatory. At the convention, he was lecturing about the science of meteoritics. I was blown away by his presentation and came away with a completely different perspective on and appreciation for the pieces of my meteorite collection. I started working for Brother Guy in the Vatican Observatory Foundation in 2014. I visited Tucson in January of 2019 to participate in a workshop the VOF was hosting. I got there a few days early, and Brother Guy took me on a tour of the Pima Air Museum. He was the best docent you could ever wish for. He knew everything about the planes there. During the workshop, we visited the University of Arizona, where Brother Guy slipped back into his docent role and told the workshop attendees some very interesting backstories about historic astronomers who worked there. As part of my work for the VOF, I Skype with Brother Guy twice a week. I commented to him recently that I seem to learn something new and interesting from him or about him practically every call. Like, for instance, he's on the board of the SETI Institute, or that he represented the Holy See at the Unispace Plus 50 conference in Vienna in June of 2018, calling again for the peaceful use of space just a few short days after Donald Trump announced the creation of the U.S. Space Force. It's not uncomfortable or anything. For years, Brother Guy has traveled the world giving live presentation to audiences large and small. He used to spend about half his time in Tucson and the other half in Rome. He's probably racked up a light year of frequent flyer miles. I often wonder how I wonder how often he's wished we've had Star Trek transporter technology. Brother Guy is now director of the Vatican Observatory and president of the Vatican Observatory Foundation. It is wonderful to work with him and an honor to call him a friend. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Brother Guy Consolmagno.
Thanks a whole bunch. So I've got a keynote how do I share? Is it share or is it video? I guess it's share.
Yep.
Yes. Share.
And you're the presenter now.
Okay. It is. By golly, it works. I never give talks about the Star of Bethlehem. But this is different because of the Great Conjunction. And in particular, because the people at the Sky at Night television show and the BBC and their magazine invited me to give a talk via Zoom or Skype or whatever it's going to be. And so I figured, I'm preparing the talk for one group, I may as well prepare it for a number of groups. You guys are the first to ever hear this talk. I have no idea how it's going to work. I have no idea how long it's going to be. I think it will probably run short rather than long. But any feedback you can give me about the talk and what worked and what didn't, because you guys are getting it for free. Sky at Night are paying for it, so I want to give them the best I can. But let's face it, talking to folks in Michigan is just a heck of a lot of fun. I'm hearing the skies from Port Austin. I have to start with a story which is going to run me even longer. I did a PhD here in Arizona. My parents came out to greet me after I defended. We drove back to Michigan and got to Port Sanilac. By that time, they had retired and moved up to Port Sanilac in the Thumb. And we got there about midnight. I remember getting out of the car and looking to the north. There was this glow of light. And I'm thinking, Port Sanilac, there's nothing there. The skies are supposed to be dark. What happened? What did they somebody build a shopping mall up there? Nobody lives there. And my mom looked at me and goes, Guy, those are the northern lights. I'd forgotten. Anyway, on to Star of Bethlehem. Let's face it, December is Star of Bethlehem season, especially for people like us who give public talks in astronomy. This year is special because we've got one of those popular explanations of the Star of Bethlehem, a close conjunction of bright planets, and that's happening overhead right now. I don't have to tell you guys, but be sure to look just at sunset for Jupiter, the bright star that's setting in the west. If you look just nearby, there's a fainter yellowish star. It's actually not a star, it's a planet, Saturn. Month, Jupiter has been creeping closer to Saturn, and on the 21st, they'll be so close together that you won't be able to see them with the naked eye, and that will be something glorious. So, was that actually something like the Star of Bethlehem? Actually, you can see with your own naked eye that when Saturn adds its light to Jupiter, you probably won't even notice it because Saturn is so much dimmer than Jupiter. What sounds dramatic on paper is likely just going to be a nice curiosity, except for the handful of us who get off on looking at stars and planets. But because of that, I'm now signed up for these 4 talks in the Star of Bethlehem. And also, as one of the costs of being the director of the Vatican Observatory, I constantly get unsolicited manuscripts from people who either worked out the replacement for the Big Bang, or people who have finally definitively figured out what the Star of Bethlehem is. And they're in good company, because if you Google Star of Bethlehem, you get 51 million results. Out of 51 million results, you'd expect one of them would be right. I really am hesitant to talk about the Star of Bethlehem. I'm afraid people are going to think that that's what the work of the Vatican Observatory actually is. There's a newspaper in England, The Independent, that wrote an article about us about 15 years ago, which stated with great authority, without actually bothering to ask us, that the chief business of the Vatican Observatory is to solve the mystery of the Star of Bethlehem. The guy obviously hadn't done his research, because if he'd looked in the literature, he could have found an article in the Chicago Tribune that said that the real purpose of the Vatican Observatory is to cast the Pope's horoscopes. So I'm going to approach this from a completely different point of view. I'm fascinated not so much by just the science of what the star might have been, there's 50 million explanations of that already, but also why this story continues to hold our imagination. And to get at where I'm coming from, I'm going to ask this crowd, how many of you remember this song, Big Yellow Taxi by Joni Mitchell. I'm not going to sing it for you, copyright reasons, but you probably remember the refrain about how they paved paradise and put up a parking lot. So, what's the song about? 3 verses and a chorus, that's what it's about. First verse, they paved paradise to put up a big fancy nightclub with a big parking lot. Second verse, they're covering apples with DDT. You remember DDT, the poison that was really good at controlling bugs, but unfortunately also poisoned the birds that ate the bugs. A little too effective. Anyway, the song goes on, they're covering the apples with DDT, and they're putting all the trees into a tree museum and charging you to see them. I like the rhyme, museum, see them, very clever. But the refrain between the verses is how it seems you don't miss what you've got until it's gone. It's like paradise, turned into a parking lot. So it sounds like the song is about protecting the environment. And it was very timely because the song actually came out in April of 1970, which was the same month as the first Earth Day. Very timely. But then you got to listen to the last verse of the song. The last verse describes the singer's hearing her boyfriend leaving the house, the door slams, and he's off in a big yellow taxi, and then she realizes you don't know what you've got till it's gone. In other words, it's actually a lover's lament song. All that stuff about the environment was just meant to set the stage for the last verse. You don't believe me? Look, first of all, it's a pop song. The genre of pop songs, even in the 60s, were mostly love songs. It ends with the boyfriend leaving. Once you say what you wanted to say, then you stop saying it. So usually the thing you wanted to say is the thing you end up with, and she wanted to tell the story about the boyfriend leaving. The house without him is like paradise paved over. It's like all the trees taken away. Looking at the empty chair at the kitchen nook makes you realize you don't miss what you got till it's gone. And if that doesn't convince you, what's the title of the song? It's not Tree Museum. It's not Parking Lot Nightclub. It's Big Yellow Taxi. That's what the song is about. Everybody thinks that it's a song about the ecology. The trouble is that the imagery that Joni Mitchell used leading up to that last verse was so powerful that it overwhelms the actual lover's lament that's part of the story. So here's my point. The Star of Bethlehem story has exactly the same problem. Everybody thinks they knows what it's about, but when you read it in its context, you realize it's just really a tiny part of a completely different story, which is the infancy narrative at the beginning of Matthew's Gospel. In other words, the Star of Bethlehem story is only one verse, one stanza of the whole song. Matthew's story begins with the begats. There's 42 so-and-so begat so-and-so, 14 times 3. And at the end of that long string, we're introduced to Joseph. Joseph finds out that his wife-to-be is pregnant, a begat that wasn't him, but he's assured it's okay. The baby's born. Wise men show up following a star. They come to Jerusalem looking for the baby to make him a king. King Herod, who's already king in Jerusalem, sends them on to Bethlehem. Gold, frankincense, and myrrh are exchanged. The wise men sneak home without telling Herod where the baby is, so the king decides to kill all of the babies in Bethlehem to eliminate his rival. But before he gets there, the Holy Family have left. They've gone to Egypt. Finally, Herod dies. The family goes to Nazareth. The child is raised. The star plays just a minor role in the second part of the story. The point of the story isn't the star. It's the baby. Never lose sight of that fact when you're talking about the Star of Bethlehem. The only source that even mentions a star, even in passing, as a side detail, not essential to the story, is the opening part of Matthew's Gospel. The other Gospels don't even mention it. And here we are. Every year, people keep asking us astronomers, what was the star? Now, Either something remarkable really did occur in the sky at the time of the birth of Jesus, or it didn't. If something did happen, it would be interesting to know what it was, but all we've got to go on are the opening of Matthew's Gospel. And it's so short that I'll read the whole thing at you. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where's the child who's been born King of the Jews? We observed his star at its rising and have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, all Jerusalem with him, and calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. And they told him, "In Bethlehem of Judea. For so it is written by the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. And then he sent them on to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you found him, bring me word, so that I may also go and pay him homage." They heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chests, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. And that's it, 12 verses. That's all the data we have to work with. And so, if we assume that there was some kind of visible sign in the skies, can we figure out, from the point of view of modern astronomy, what it might have been? What are some possible explanations? First, let's address the question of exactly when this was supposed to have occurred. When was Jesus born? You probably know it was a fellow named Dionysius Exiguus, or in English, Dennis the Little, who about the year 525 first tried to calculate the year that Jesus was born, and in the process he set up our system of AD and BC years. And he got it almost right, which is to say he got it wrong. Not much. How much? How do we know when Jesus was born? Well, Luke is the other gospel writer who talks about the birth of Jesus, and he says that it happens during the first censor of Caesar Augustus. This is Caesar Augustus. Augustus reigned between 27 BC and 14 AD, AD 14. So that gives you a little bit of a window, and scholars looking into it say that he had a census somewhere between 8 and 6 BC. Luke also says this was when Quirinius was governor of Syria, and we know when that was AD 6 to 12. From Luke's infancy narrative, you also can toss in that the birth probably took place in the spring, because that's when shepherds would have been out at night tending their flock. Luke also says that when Jesus was preaching, he was about 30 years old. And someone in John's gospel comments, "Oh, he's not even 50 years old yet." So, in order to fit the various crucifixions accounts, he died when Passover was either on a Friday or a Saturday, and so you can calculate that puts the year of his death at either AD 30 or AD 33, so that puts his birth 30 to 50 years before then. Well later than 20 BC, probably something more like between 10 and 1 BC. Now in Matthew, the main character, one of the main characters, is King Herod. We know from the historian Josephus that Herod died in 4 BC, just before a lunar eclipse. So, the birth of Jesus had to occur before then. Now, if you've been paying attention, you notice that the dates don't all line up. But the one that disagrees with the other three is Quirinius, so that's the easiest one to toss away. You see the problem. In order to even try to do any science, we're already throwing away data points. Next, given this time frame, probably between 8 and 6 BC, but in any case, probably between 15 and 4 BC. What kind of astronomical sign are we looking for? It should fit the description of a star, something to do with its rising, indicate the birth of a king, that it happened in Judea, and since nobody in Jerusalem seemed to have noticed the star before the Magi showed up, it should be consistent with the apparent fact that only astrologers were wise to this event. Now, sign by its very nature means something out of the ordinary. That's the one thing about stars is that they're very orderly. They're very predictable. You see the same constellations during the same seasons year after year. If any kind of change at all would take more than a human lifetime to notice. There are exceptions. First of all, what happens when an ordinary star suddenly gets much brighter? Sometimes this happens. It's called going nova. Of course, this is even the rarer thing of supernova. I remember I was a grad student here in Arizona back in the 70s, and I had a roommate, Bob Howell, who's an astronomy professor up in Wyoming today. And he rushed into the apartment. He was all agitated. He says, "You got to go outside. You got to look. I nearly fell off my bike." You know, who else but an astronomy graduate student would be riding a bicycle on the Tucson streets after dark, looking up rather than where he's supposed to be going? But we can roll. Anyway, you go outside, and sure enough, there's the summer triangle, only there's 4 bright stars, not 3. 3 to a triangle, right? But there's the 4th one. The internet tells me that Nova Cygni 1975 was a bright nova that occurred in early September in the constellation Cygnus, so it fits right in with where I remember it. It reached magnitude of 1.7, which still made it the second brightest nova of the 20th century. There's also something there about oral traditions, because I remember that moment. But Bob and I didn't actually start renting that apartment until fall term of 75. So if we're seeing a nova in the first week of September, we must have just moved in, which is not the way I remember it, but it was, a long time ago. Quirinius was governor then, right? Something like that. If you know your constellation, it looked really strange. If you know the summer triangle, then it was really strange to have a 4th star in the summer triangle. But, even magnitude 1.7 is still dimmer than Vega, Deneb, and Altair. A nova is notable if you know the stars, but otherwise it might go unnoticed, unless you're an astrologer or a wise man. So that works. However, novas happen pretty often. There's probably a visible one about every 10 years or so, which hardly seems spectacular enough to announce the birth of a king. There is one particular published suggestion that connects the Star of Bethlehem to a Chinese guest star recorded in 5 BC, and it was in a place in the sky that is consistent with the variable, the nova D.O. Aquili. We know D.O. Aquili went nova in 1925, and this is the record of it. But when you study that particular star, you discover that it's a rather ordinary star. It goes nova about once every 1,000,000 years, not once every 2,000 years. In its eruption, when you actually collect the data, you see the brightest it got was about magnitude 8.5. Certainly not brighter than magnitude 8, which meant it wasn't even naked eye visible. And if you study the physics of why it went nova, you realize there's no way that it could go nova bright enough to be a naked eye object. Finally, when you go back and read the actual description in the Chinese literature, it refers to it as a broom star, which is the way that they describe actually comets. What about a supernova? They're spectacular. If one goes off close enough to us, you can see it in the daytime. That was Arthur C. Clarke's explanation, the setting of his famous story, The Star, which involved Jesuit astronomers doing stupid things, but that's something else. A supernova would definitely be an attention getter. And rare enough that, wow, you would really notice it. The last naked eye supernova observed in our galaxy was 1604, more than 400 years ago. Was one that you could see in the Large Magellanic Cloud in 1987, but nobody lives that far south, certainly, to have recorded it. if something like that had happened 2,000 years ago. More to the point, supernova leave behind remnants. You know, there were the Chinese astronomers and the Arabic astronomers in 1054 who saw a bright light in the sky. When you go where they saw that light, this is what you see today. It's the Crab Nebula. And the remnants that they leave behind are really, really strong radio sources. Not only that, but with the Crab Nebula, we know how bright it was in 1054. We know what it was looking at, what it looked like when it was seen in a telescope, which was, where am I here? 1731, John Bevan was the first person to notice it. And we know how much it has faded, so we know basically the whole evolutionary sequence of supernova remnants. And there's nothing in the sky that looks like it's 2,000 years old. That was a supernova remnant, and there's nothing giving out that kind of energy that a radio astronomer would have noticed it. So, what about comets? They also can be spectacular. Did you see Comet Neowise this summer? I hope so. You know what I mean. This is a photograph that one of our guys at the Vatican took outside of Rome, and you can see it was visible even in the twilight. During the time I was in grad school, I had a chance to see Comet West. And these two pictures are a pretty good summary of what they looked like to the naked eye, one compared to the other. Comet West was 10 times bigger and brighter and looked like you were in a planetarium show and somebody had shown a comet on the ceiling. It was that bright. Even knowing what a comet was, going outside and seeing it in person up in the sky and looking like that was eerie. It was unsettling. It was darn scary. Something that big and that bright was in the sky where it didn't belong. So could it have been a comet? Besides the comet, the Chinese comet I mentioned, there we also know that Halley's comet made a pass in 12 BC, which is kind of just at the edge of our possible time period. Most comets, of course, we can't predict where they were because they orbit a million light years from us, or maybe 10,000 AU from us with a million-year period. And that means that they're only visible when they're really close to the sun once every million years. So there could have been any number, probably one every 10 or 20 years, of bright naked eye comets. It's certainly within the realm of possibility. Certainly we saw the Chinese broom star, which they saw as a naked eye comet. The problem with this explanation is that in ancient times, comets were universally interpreted as signs of doom. Remember my reaction to seeing Comet West, even knowing what it was? It's almost never been the case that a sign that, like with a comet, has been associated with something joyful. The one exception I've come across was actually Caesar Augustus, who used the comet that appeared when his uncle Julius died as a good omen. Well, good to him, not for Julius. Finally, we come to planetary conjunctions like the one happening this month. Planets change their position among the stars. Astrologers have long connected their positions with events on Earth. And so nowadays, most attempts to work out a possible astronomical explanation for the Star of Bethlehem look to an interesting, unusual chance conjunction of the planets. Actually, it was Johannes Kepler who started this whole game. For the first time, he had really accurate positions of the planets, which he had gotten from Tycho Brahe. And he had a new theory for planetary motions and ellipses, which meant that in the early 1600s, he was able to calculate planetary positions backwards to the time of Christ, and in that way try to figure out what the Star of Bethlehem was. But actually, what he was doing was combining two different theories, because he had seen the supernova of 1604, and he had no idea what caused it. So he proposed that the supernova was somehow the result of planetary conjunctions. And with that in mind, he found a series of conjunctions between Jupiter and Saturn that occurred in 7 BC. On May 23rd, they were separated by 1 degree, and the crescent moon was nearby. And on October 5th, they were back close again, 1 degree apart. And then again on December 6th. And this is a great favorite of planetarium shows because it's real easy to show on the ceiling. Especially if you forget about the part where these conjunctions are actually supposed to be generating a supernova, which they didn't do and they don't do. And it's a supernova that's supposed to have been the Star of Bethlehem. Not to mention that, except for the first one, it doesn't really fit in with the idea of a springtime birth. That's not the only possible set of conjunctions. Many years ago, there was a guy at the Griffith Observatory in Los Angeles, John Mosley, who argued that the conjunction of Jupiter and Venus in August of 3 BC was the beginning of a series of conjunctions that would be fascinating to any kind of astrologer. The August conjunction in 3 BC took place in the constellation of Leo, which, he informs us, was the astrological sign of Judah. The Lion of Judah is mentioned in Genesis. Later, Jupiter, the king of the gods, made 3 close passes to the brightest star in Leo, Regulus, the star of the kings. Then, on June 17th, 2 BC, Jupiter and Venus encounter each other again, even closer than Jupiter and Saturn are going to be this month. Obviously, it would have looked like a star. After all, Matthew talks about the Magi looking at a star, one star, not a grouping of stars, and 2 different events. He says these kinds of close conjunctions occur less than once a century. The last time was in 1818, and the next one will be in 2065. But he's thinking of Jupiter and Venus, not Jupiter and Saturn, which we're seeing this month. And he says, the historical evidence says that the most likely year of Christ's birth was 3 or 2 BC. He doesn't give his source and kind of ignores the problem that King Herod actually died 2 years earlier than this event. One of the more amusing twists on this came from Father Gustav Teresch, who's a delightfully mad Hungarian who worked at the Vatican Observatory as their librarian from the 1980s to the 1990s. He wrote a book called The Bible and Astronomy, about which I will just say, I met Father Teresch, and he was a lovely man. And if you want my opinion of his book, I'll repeat, he was a lovely man. He was a bit odd, but he came by it honestly. As a young priest, he had first been imprisoned and tortured by the Nazis, and then after the war, he was imprisoned and tortured by the communists. So he had a different view on life, which you can't blame him for. Anyway, remember Kepler's series of conjunctions in 7 BC. He says on November 7th, they weren't that far apart. Or actually, it's Jupiter and Saturn that are very close to each other in 7 BC. They meet in the constellation of Pisces the fish, and he says, Pisces the fish is associated with Israel. It's appropriate for the one who's going to be fishers of men. And he suggests in that location, it might have been lined up with the zodiacal light. Now, what's the zodiacal light? It's this faint reflection of sunlight off dust in the asteroid belt. Almost impossible to see nowadays, because of light pollution. I saw it only once at a star party in the Oklahoma Panhandle when it was really, really dark. But an observer watching the planets would see this beam of light following along the ecliptic. And 7 BC is the year that he says the historians have identified was the year of Jesus' birth. So you've even got the beam of light shining down on, the house until you walk over to where the house is, but never mind that. Certainly an appealing idea, though. One really elegant theory that I like comes from a book published about 20 years ago by the astronomer Michael Molnar, and he's starting with 3 questions. First, any comet or any nova or any alignment of planets is going to have the whole world spinning underneath them. So how could something in the sky lead the astrologers specifically to Jerusalem? Secondly, like I mentioned, comets, things like that have been omens of bad fortune. What kind of celestial event actually did signify the birth of a king to the astrologers of that time? And finally, if it was spectacular, how come nobody noticed it? So he answers all three in terms of the astrology of the day. He says each region of the world was associated with a different zodiacal sign, and the region around Jerusalem was connected with Aries, the ram, and you can tell local coins had this leaping ram with a star. Obviously, this signified that Judah was associated with the constellation Aries. He describes the astronomical alignment of planets in the sun at his birth that Caesar Augustus claimed was the evidence for his own destined royalty. The key is having the planets rise with the sun, what's called a heliacal rising. Now, heliacal risings are significant to people at the time. You probably know the story of the bright star Sirius, the dog star, rising alongside the sun in August, which told the Egyptians to get ready for the flooding of the Nile, and why we still refer to these things as the dog days. Notice, only an astrologer calculating planetary positions would know when heliacal risings occur, because the presence of the sun among the planets makes them impossible to actually see. But those are where the planets were on 17 or 18 of April, 6 BC. That's the year he tells us the historians have identified as the most likely year of Jesus' birth. And it's in the constellation of Aries. Really cool. So, is this or any of the other explanations really what Matthew is talking about? Just hearing these different stories, you probably are convinced that, if nothing else, the historians are about as uncertain as the astronomers are as to what constellation signifies a king of the Jews, what year really was the most likely year of Jesus' birth. But in any event, what's clear is it's not that modern astronomy has shown the story of Matthew about the Star of Bethlehem cannot be true, just the opposite. Modern astronomy gives us too many possible explanations for the star. And maybe it wasn't a star at all. What if the Star of Bethlehem was a miracle? Maybe there was some totally miraculous light zooming around the sky like a UFO that led the Magi to Bethlehem and sidestepped the astronomy altogether. And it would raise other difficulties, though, because then you'd have to ask, how come nobody in Jerusalem noticed it? More to the point, I argue that such a reading is theologically suspect. Okay, you could have an all-powerful God who could have created the UFO, and all-powerful God can do whatever he wants. That's why you call him God. But for that matter, such a God could have sent Jesus into the world, fully grown up, powerful, riding on a cloud of power, unmistakably a deity, dressed up in a man suit like some kind of Eastern avatar. That was actually the kind of Messiah they were expecting, and no one would have mistaken it. But instead, Matthew and Luke describe a God who shows a supernatural restraint. Jesus comes as an infant, born in the world like any other human, subject to the very laws that God had used to form the universe. And maybe that's the point of the story. And maybe it is just a story, a pious story, nothing more. Maybe we should just take it as a symbolic tale written to signify that Jesus was as much a king as any secular ruler, just like Caesar Augustus. Augustus used astrological signs to shore up his legitimacy as Rome's emperor. Why not do the same for Jesus? And it was just a coincidence that there's this multiple conjunction actually occurring at just the right time, and a conjunction which actually Matthew never even talks about. He just says a star at its rising. But it's not impossible. I mean, the Bible is a collection of different genres, different books. It's some are history books, some are pious stories. That's because it was written in a style designed to solve a problem we don't have anymore. In ancient times, books and the people who could read them were rare. Nowadays, most everybody can read. And ever since the invention of the printing press, even before the internet, you're never too far from a book. So if there's some idea or a fact you need to look it up, you can look it up. But back then, most people could only learn from what they heard. Usually what was read to them during a church service by, the one guy in the village who could read, the local rabbi or the local parish priest. It means that books were written with a kind of hooks that make the message memorable. Something you're not going to forget, even if you hear it only once a year or less. So often, the most important information and the truths that Scripture tells us about who we are, how we should live, they were communicated in the form of stories, because you can remember stories. Even if you just hear them once, you remember a story. Those of you who go to church on Sunday, you probably hear, a reading from St. Paul, some theology, which zooms over your head and you forget it the moment you've heard it. And then you hear a gospel story, and you go, oh yeah, that story, I remember that. The point is, we shouldn't be surprised when Scripture gives us stories instead of straight theology. Storytelling is one of the tricks used when the Bible is written. And, it's not just the Bible. You find it in Greek mythology. You find it even today in, say, teaching people about ecology using pop songs. And there's a benefit to using that technique, which we kind of miss out sometimes today. There are essential elements to the truth that cannot be conveyed in an idle list of facts. There's more to reality than that which can be weighed and measured or videotaped or recorded in a book. Ask anybody who, owned a classic 66 Volkswagen Beetle. There's more ingredients to that car than what you find listed in the Chilton repair manual. But there are some nagging questions that come with that kind of simple explanation. Think back to my example of the big yellow taxi. One thing that I use to figure out what the song is about is to say, oh, it's a pop song. You have to pay attention to the genre of pop songs. Well, you have to pay attention to the genre of a story if you want to understand it. I mean, if a story starts out, once upon a time, you don't expect it to contain scientific details. So, what is the genre of the Star of Bethlehem story? What did pious tales look like back then? Were pious tales common in the culture where Matthew's gospel was written? Enough that anybody hearing it back then would have known that's how it was supposed to be taken. Did the author of that gospel have been subtle enough to write that kind of symbolic passage? And the answer is we don't know. There's not a lot of literature other than the Gospels themselves that comes from that particular culture and time. We got plenty of literature from scholars in Rome or Greece at that time, but not from this minor sect in Judea, except the Gospels. And we got plenty of things that Christians wrote hundreds of years later, all that fan fiction about the Magi, counting them that there were 3 wise men. You didn't hear the number 3 in the Matthew passage. That they were kings. You didn't hear that in Matthew. That their names were Casper, Melchior, and Balthazar. Now those are pious tales. That passage in Matthew? Not so clear. If the wise men are an invention of Matthew, why would he invent them as astrologers? The Jewish scriptures are pretty specific about condemning the idea that stars had divine power or that you could prophesy by the stars, because it's way too close to the idea of you should be worshiping the stars instead of worshiping God. Recall that the cosmology of the times assigned pagan gods to the 7 planets and the 7 days of the week. In English, we still talk about Saturn Day and Sun Day and Moon Day. And if you speak, Spanish or Italian or French, the other days of the week are named for the planets. Of course, those gods supposedly influenced human affairs when they were overhead. And so did the rest of the stars. If you want to be a medical doctor in those days, you have to study astrology, because that's how you can know when a planet or a star is causing what particular disease. You don't believe? Well, you notice that Winter constellations show up in December and so does the flu? Mere coincidence? Or were those stars casting on us their baleful influence? The Italian word for influence is influenza. Just because the Jews didn't worship the stars or their pagan gods like the pagans did, doesn't mean the Jews didn't assume the cosmology was true or false. They had 7 days of the week too, and you can find mosaics illustrating the zodiac in ancient synagogues. The best science of their day taught them that the complex and bizarre things that happen in human affairs find their parallel in the complex and bizarre motions of the planets. Indeed, you've probably heard the classic Yiddish expression Mazel Tov. It's derived from Hebrew words that mean, in effect, that one lives under favorable stars. Mazel originally meant the influences on our lives that rain down from the zodiac. All which is to say, I can't rule out that it was just meant as a pious story, but I'm not convinced. The explanation raises too many questions as well, which brings me to one final question about the star. Why do we care? Why does it matter? Isn't it like, arguing about what was the make of the big yellow taxi? But it doesn't matter. Think about it. Every Christmas, the malls are ringing with the piped-in music of We Three Kings. The gifts that the wise men bring have launched a shopping season that affects the economies of nations. And every year, planetarium directors and astronomy clubs like yours get deluged with questions about the star. What's at stake here? Suppose that in the end we are able to prove, historically, astronomically, that there was something unusual in the sky in that night 2,000 years ago. What effect is that going to have on people of faith, Or what else if the literal truth of the scripture story cannot be proved by history or science? Should that matter? If we can't prove that the story of the Magi actually happened, does that mean that everything else in Matthew's gospel is a tissue of lies? Or on the other hand, if we do accept some astronomical explanation like Molnar's heliacal conjunction, does that prove that everything else that Matthew says is true? Is the Star of Bethlehem supposed to be a test for everything else in Scripture? The same part of Matthew that tells us that there was a star also tells us that there was a virgin birth. So why would you be cynical about the one but insist on the truth of the other? I find this odd mixture of fear and credulity in people who worry too much about scientific explanations for the Star of Bethlehem. But I think the fascination with the star goes a lot deeper than seeking some kind of proof. It's more than just astronomical calculations. After all, that fan fiction about Caspar, Melchior, and Balthazar was written thousands of years before Kepler tried to work it out. It's been 400 years since Galileo's telescope and Kepler's orbits and Newton's physics separated our idea of heaven from the heavens, and yet here we are, still staring up, still looking for the spirit in the sky, to quote another bad pop song from that era. I think that one important reason we conflate the sky and the heavens is that stars can put our immediate times and our immediate crises into perspective. Stars show us a beauty that cannot be found on Earth and that cannot be paved over, unless you count light pollution. But it was in turbulent times much like today, full of wars, full of plagues, when the founder of my own religious order, St. Ignatius, wrote that he took the greatest consolation from gazing at the sky and the stars, and he did this often and for quite a long time. So, since you've invited a Jesuit brother here tonight, I'll end with a little mini sermon. The beauty of the stars and planets and the way we can calculate their locations reminds us that we are still under the protection of the one who made both the stars and the laws that control their motion. That one also created us, gave us the talents and the abilities to develop our sciences, to understand both the universe over our heads and, yes, even the diseases and vaccines here on Earth. Stargazing is a conjunction of science, beauty, and awe. Even when we're suffering, it's good to cast our eyes upwards every now and then at the stars and the planets in their untiring dance. This universe is good. We should never lose hope in its goodness. It is so good that we're able to commemorate this season, a time when, as I believe, its creator sent into the universe his only son. More than planetary conjunctions or any of the 50 million other explanations, that's the real message of the star. And, if you think that's too preachy for you, just go outside and look at Jupiter and Saturn. They're gorgeous. They'll be meeting up on the 21st. That's going to happen, even if it's cloudy that night and you can't see it. Thanks a whole lot for having me here.
Thank you, Brother Guy. I have been hoping for a definitive Star of Bethlehem talk for a long time, and we finally have it, and that was wonderful.
Well, thanks. Definitive because it's not definitive.
Exactly. But you went into detail that I knew some of the arguments and some of the scenarios, but you went into detail on some of the hypotheses. That's like, wow, I have never heard of that one before. This is awesome.
I should give credit where it's due. A lot of this I swiped from a good friend of mine, Brad Schaefer, who did his PhD thesis on gamma ray bursts and wondered whether you can see naked eye flashes of light to go with gamma ray bursts. And I'm getting an echo here now. But anyway, in the process, he learned how to understand what the human eye can see, what the naked eye can see, and became an expert in a lot of astroastronomy. And so he's given a lot of these talks. That picture I showed of the conference at the beginning, he gave me that because he's in the picture. He actually went to that conference. I didn't.
That is great. Do we have questions? If so, if you could put them into the chat, and Bob can read them aloud.
Getting a lot of echo. Was it just me?
I think Ken's speaker. And so, once he went on mute, you notice we don't hear it anymore.
Okay, thank you,
and
Ken.
I think it's your speaker.
Well, Brother Guy, I don't know if you have a minute or two, but one of the things that you keep getting asked is, why does the Vatican have an observatory? And why do you work for them?
Oh, shouldn't every religion support a major observatory? I think that'd be a great thing. My friend Paul Muller, who wrote that book, Would You Baptize an ET with Me? He has an even better answer. It says, because we can't afford a particle accelerator. There's both the history and a deeper meaning. The history was, when it was established first, was to help reform the calendar in 1582. When the most recent incarnation was in the 1890s, when the Vatican needed a way of having something that made it look like an independent nation, independent of Italy. And all at that time, they wanted something that was symbolic for, the church actually supports science. And don't blame us for stupid things that science does or stupid things that religious people have done. We can do plenty of stupid things on our own. More to the point, it's a marvelous way of reminding, I think, the people I'm preaching to the most are my fellow religionists, the people who are believers who are afraid of science, to let them know that science is not something you should be afraid of. Have more faith in your faith, good heavens. And that science is where we encounter the truth of the universe. And if you believe that God is a God of truth, you're encountering God there. And what's also true is, C.S. Lewis talks about encountering God in joy, being surprised by joy. The fact that a really nicely done bit of science or A Night Under the Stars gives you joy, to me, is also a sign of God's presence. So it's the last explanation really comes from John Paul II, who wrote, about 30 years ago, a wonderful description of science and religion. And I'm see if I can quote him well. Science keeps religion from superstition, and religion keeps science from false absolutes. We need each other. On that, go to our website and you'll find all the more about it. The website that, Bob, you worked hard to keep up.
Put that link in the chat here. Yeah, that's the main website.
Ken, I think you're about to unmute to ask your question.
I'd love to. Brother Guy, when I was at the University of Arizona in the 60s, I was in a debate thing. Well, at the same time I was doing a class in astronomy, and we talked about the Star of Bethlehem. And I did a little bit of research in it. And one of the things I noticed on your chart that shows that the year 12 BC is pretty much on all those lines, which lines itself up with Halley's Comet. But the problem with that, the problem with it is, if you say that in the East we saw a star, it doesn't work. It would have to be we in the East have seen a star. And that was a possibility as one of the things. I just wondered how you'd reflect upon that. And of course, the people of the time kind of knew what comets were anyway. So I'm kind of think the wise men would know that anyway. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, you gotta mute yourself so I don't echo. Got it. Yeah, the one you wind up losing a couple of pieces of evidence because it doesn't line up with the census of Augustus, which was 8 to 6 BC. But since we've thrown out other pieces of data, you're certainly free to throw out whatever data you want to fit to make your favorite theory work. That's why I don't feel we have a definitive answer, because there are too many possibilities. And I'm not going to stand up here and tell you, no, it couldn't be that. Just that it's no better than a lot of other explanations that have come up with. And certainly, the way that that comets are described in Josephus, the Jewish historian, they are definitely seen as signs of doom. He talks about the destruction of Jerusalem being foretold by a comet that appeared in the sky.
Well, what I'm saying is I pick up on what you're saying exactly. Yeah, it's very, very confusing and it misses the point, I think, overall, doesn't it?
Yeah. But it's fun. And let's face it, we're doing this, a lot of it, because it's fun. And because it has fascinated us even before we worried about the astronomy.
I've always wondered how any celestial object could guide anyone to a specific place. A direction, yes, but a place, no.
And that's a great question. I'm not an astrologer, so I won't give the details of how they think. I don't know that. What I have been told is that a certain constellation would be associated, for whatever reasons, with a certain region. So if your celestial event occurred in that constellation, then you'd think to go to that region. Now, from there, how do you get from, Jerusalem to Bethlehem to the house where the baby is? That's never explained. I think that's one of the great mysteries. How did the wise men know that this was the baby they were looking for?
Wasn't there a passage that said they asked?
No, you've read the entire thing. They saw the star over the house, and that's how they knew, according to Matthew. Everything else is fan fiction.
Yeah, which comes back to my original question. How can any celestial event get anyone to a house?
Yep. And the answer is, I don't know, which is not the same thing as saying it's impossible.
Dale Hollenbaugh. We see a question in chat. And Jonathan, you had a response, but Dale, if you want to ask your question, probably a good time.
Brother Guy, so, the Gregorian calendar, Jeff McCloud had a talk last week about, mathematics of planetarians, and they talked a lot about, determining time and, the Gregorian calendar and setting that up. How much of a relationship did the Vatican Observatory at that time play into coming up with the calendar? I'm presuming that one preceded the other, but I mean, was that the reason that it started?
In essence, yeah, it was the reason that a pope hired some astronomers to advise him on what to do with the calendar. If you remember, this happens in the 1500s. So 1520, you've got Luther in the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. And in the 1540s, you've got the Council of Trent, which was the Catholic side trying to figure out what to do with the Protestants. And in the midst of the 18 years that the Council of Trent went on, one of the things that they passed was an instruction to the Pope to fix the calendar. Everybody knew that the calendar was off. There are two problems with the calendar. One was that having a leap year every 4 years gets you off by not quite 1 day per century. By the 1500s, they were off by about 10 days. How do you fix that, and how do you make sure it doesn't happen in the future? And the second problem was, how can we figure out when Easter is, which had a new problem when we're suddenly sending missionaries and other Europeans to places like South America, to places like India, where you don't have immediate contact with somebody telling you when Easter is going to be, and where the old rule of it's the first Sunday after the first full moon, after the first day of spring. Well, what happens if the full moon occurs on a Sunday? And what happens if it occurs on a Sunday in one part of the world, but it's a Saturday in a different part of the world? How would you, rather than making all of these people carry big tables, how would you solve that? Hired astronomers, including a fellow named Christopher Clavius, you probably know Crater Clavius, and the moon named for him. But in the end, they actually adopted a proposal by a layman, which was beautifully simple and didn't worry about trying to get it exactly right. It was a formula that got it close enough, 15 years out of 17 years. And that's the formula we use to this day. But in the process, Clavius was so well established as a mathematician. Before then, mathematics was not considered a real science the way that philosophy was. But it gave enough prestige to him that he was able to establish essentially a department of mathematics and philosophy at the Jesuit, the Roman College. Galileo was a friend of his. Galileo used his teaching notes to teach math when he was teaching in Pisa. And this started the idea of the Jesuits at that university paying attention to astronomy. And I see somebody saying that the observatory was started to refute Galileo and Copernicus. No, absolutely not. Not the case at all. For one thing, nobody thought the Earth was the center of the universe. In the old cosmology, the Earth was the bottom of the universe. I mentioned my book, Would You Baptize in ET, which I happen to have a copy right here. It's such a good book, you should buy 2 copies. There's a long description of what the whole Galileo affair was about. And the bottom line is the church screwed up, but not the way you think it's screwed up. It's screwed up in a different way. We're very creative. We know how to screw up in all sorts of new ways.
Why did it take so long for the church to forgive him?
again, turn your speaker off. The church adopted the Copernican system once the physics had caught up by the early 1700s. That wasn't an issue. And it even taught the Copernican system before the physics had caught up, just because it was a better way of calculating planetary positions. What John Paul II did in the 1990s was personally apologize to Galileo, who of course was long gone by then, because what happened to him was unfair. They got Galileo in his trial on a technicality, and he was guilty of the technicality, but that misses the point. He should never have been put on trial in the first place. But hey, nobody likes to admit they're wrong. And I know a lot of scientists who get things about the church wrong, and they don't want to admit they're wrong either. I know a lot of scientists who get things wrong about their science. And what's the famous line that physics advances one funeral at a time? It comes with being human beings, which is why it's so much fun.
All right, that's been some excellent questions and discussion. Any more questions for Brother Guy?
Oh,
Rare opportunity.
brother Guy, I've got one quick personal question about February. Bob and brother Guy, and I think there's online convention coming up. I'll send a message or an IM with with that question about
The
that.
only way you can reach me reliably is by email. I never answer my phone. I never see text messages. It's a nice filter. Anybody who sends me a text message is not somebody who knows me, so I can ignore them.
That is something I may want to think about doing. But yep. So I'll send an email. I'll shoot you a chat too.
Okay, great. Looking forward to hearing from you, Adrian.
All righty.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great time. I hope the auroras pick up where you are. And I miss Michigan, which shows that I haven't lived there long enough to remember how bad the winters can get. But I do miss it. And I am getting to live up there.
Thank you again, Brother Guy. It was an honor to have you tonight.
Stay in touch. Have a great Christmas, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
2020 and 2021 officers, I'd like y'all to stay on so we can try to get a Zoom tile style photograph for.
Are we supposed to do the raffle drawing now?
Yes. I just, before anybody, I don't know who signed up for the raffle, so I don't know if any officers might have missed my messages and might be planning to bail. Would you like to be the master of ceremonies for the raffle, Jonathan?
Sure.
How do you get into the raffle?
You had to read the email that said you had to.
Oh, I don't read
email
emails.
A certain. You had to email raffle@warrenastro.org before 8:15 p.m. But
it's 9:19 now.
I know. So maybe somebody will share.
All right, proceed. Not my year. No, go ahead.
We don't have a whole lot to raffle. So what we have, if somebody, Diane, if you could post, or Dale could post the list of raffle prizes into the chat, so I can remember what they are. I'm gonna share this window and hope that it's the right one. Is it trying to share? Well, I'm gonna try it. We'll see how it goes. Okay. Are you seeing a gigantic desktop?
It's not gigantic, but I'm seeing it.
Are you seeing a giant expanse of black space and then no actual, and a tiny little window?
That I'm seeing.
Yes.
That I'm seeing.
All right. Well, that's great, but it'll do, I think.
It works. It works.
I know, but it's just very frustrating, but whatever. All right, can you read it? Let's see if I can. Maybe I can zoom in. All right. All right. So the prizes again, donated by Dale Parton, is a wall art of the solar system that goes from the sun all the way out to Pluto, I think. Is that true, Dale? It's either Neptune or Pluto. I don't know how far it
Hang
goes.
on, let me look at it.
The next prize we have, donated by Dale Teamy, is the 2021 Royal Astronomical Society of Canada Observer's Handbook, also known in this august society as the Book of All Knowledge. And the final thing, the final donor was Sky and Telescope magazine, and they donated a pocket sky atlas and a Caldwell object poster. And I have to say, the Caldwell object poster, something happened to it either in storage or in mailing, because one edge of it is pretty dinged up. So you're going to have to iron it before you frame it. But that is what it is. So those are your choices, and I'm going to start hitting the button.
Hey,
All right,
Jonathan.
are you ready? Uh-huh.
Hey, we have the potential mystery prize at the post office that I wasn't able to pick up. If you want, we could raffle the mystery prize. The only problem is if it's a bill, then whoever wins it's going to end up having to pay it.
We have a contingency. We have a contingency if the mystery prize is a bill. I'll take you up on that.
Okay, so let's do that then. So you are also welcome to choose. We'll pick 5 names, and you are welcome to choose the mystery prize. And you probably won't have to pay a bill, but we'll find out. So
maybe not pick the mystery prize because it might not exist. So maybe just do one raffle for the mystery prize. The last one is for the mystery prize.
Mystery prize will exist. We will make it exist.
All right. Let's start spinning. Dale Hollenbaugh, what's your choice?
Oh, okay. So I can choose one of those?
Yes.
One of those items that I listed, other than the mystery prize, because I guess we're going to do that last.
What's the solar system artwork? Do you have a picture
If
of that?
if you look at your email, there's a photo of it. I don't have a photo of it handy, and it's currently sitting in Dale Parton's house. But maybe Dale Parton. Oh, look at that! Dale Parton is doing the live demonstration.
Nice.
It's the sun and then the solar system. I mean, the planets, including Pluto. I used to have this, well, I formerly have had this hanging on my wall.
It's a long rectangular picture with all the planets.
Okay. You want that? Yeah, I think I'll take that.
All right, and that's that should be an easy delivery too, because I think you both live in about the same area. So
I don't know. I live pretty far away.
Okay.
We'll work it out.
Yeah,
all righty. All right, that's one down. Let's spin again. In fact, actually, I'm going to remove you from contention, and let's see. Does it still? Did I have to hit the button again? Oh my goodness, Dale Parton! If it chooses all Dales, I'm going to be really surprised.
I'll pass. I'd rather have somebody else get a prize.
All right. It will crack me up if it's all right. Susan, are you still with us? I can't see who's still on the Webex.
Yep. Hi, I'm here.
All right. What prize would you like?
I'd like the mystery prize.
Oh, I think we were going to do that one last, but
We can give her the mystery prize.
Or okay.
She
All
wants a
right,
mystery
fair
prize?
enough.
Cool, give her the mystery prize.
All right. All right. So that's the mystery prize disposed of. All right, let's spin again. Let's take Susan off the list. Mike Young, are you on the Webex, Mike? If anyone can check in on the YouTube and see if he is on the YouTube.
I don't see a Mike Young on WebEx.
Could some on the YouTube to see if somebody is frantically posting? Because if I get on YouTube while I'm streaming, it might cause some echoing.
I'm looking at YouTube right now. I'm trying to see if Mike Young responds.
You can either post a comment or very, very, very quickly shoot me an email, but
I'm not seeing a comment yet.
uh-oh. Oh, well. Let's do one more inbox reload.
It's like
Must be present to win, right?
Just like when a raffle ticket holder goes home for the night.
I
We've
guess
been
so.
here before.
Ooh, all right. Well, it doesn't look like I have anything in my email box, so I'm sorry,
I got
Mike.
no response at all.
We'll get you next year.
You have to be present to win.
Yeah, let's.
Yep.
Victor Mansky. Victor, are you still with
Victor's
us?
still here. Yep.
Sure am.
All right, Victor, which one would you like?
Boy, what was it from the list? Let's see.
Royal Astronomical Society of Canada Handbook, the Caldwell Object Poster, or the Pocket Sky Atlas?
Oh, I think I was going to go for the book.
Rask Handbook, excellent choice.
All righty.
Thank you.
So that will be winging its way to you from Pensacola, I think.
Yeah, it'll be in the mail within a day or two.
Okay.
Alrighty.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Spin it again. Ken Burton. Caldwell Object.
I'll take the Caldwell Objects poster.
All right.
All right, you can do that.
Thank you.
You get out your clothes iron because the edge does need to be ironed down from the back before it goes in the frame.
Thank you.
And
hit
the button.
Alrighty, and then finally the Pocket Sky Atlas, which you do need a kind of big pocket for. Let's see how it goes. Okay. Clearly it isn't actually removing people from the list. All right, and Tab Ahmed is the winner of the Pocket Sky Atlas. So he had told me earlier which one he wanted. So, alrighty, well I guess that's a raffle then.
Thank you, Jonathan, for conducting the raffle. That is a wrap. The raffle is the cue for everybody to head on out, except, of course, the past and present officers, because we want to try for the screenshot photo. So,
Merry Christmas to everybody, and
Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah,
Merry Christmas.
Happy New Year,
Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year.
and Seven Ponds Astronomy Club special guest Saturday. You will get an email blast tonight or tomorrow morning advertising to you a great talk by somebody that you've seen come to the WASP, Rajiv Ganguly, Journey from the Edge of Darkness. Just got word of that tonight, and we'll be sending that out. So we've still got astronomy to do this year, gang. Still got an open house on the schedule, and we'll see y'all on the next Webex.
Ken, unmute your mic for a second.
I'm there. Okay.
Now batting for the Yankees. Number two, Derek Jeter. Number two.
Adrian, go to your room.
I am in my room.
I know. That's why I said it. Good night, everybody. Take care, all.
Alrighty.
Good night, everybody. Be safe. Thank you very much.
Well, I think we've got the board members that we're going to get, so I'm going to
All right.
take a, if I can, I don't know if this will work.
Mike Young just showed up on YouTube.
Oh, no.
He's wondering what do we pick.
Oh.
Mystery box number 2. Not kidding. I'm going to put that down. Mystery box number 2.
Okay, I'll
All right. Everybody keeps moving around. Professor Dunifer, can I turn off your video? Can I drag somebody else to the gosh darn it.
Diane, there's a light behind your head that makes your picture a little.
Oh, the lithium battery in my spotlight burned out.
Oh. Well, I have another battery.
Address for Mike Young?
No, that's it.
Just have him email us, I think.
Okay.
All right. Let's see if I can. There we go. It's the story of an astronomy club that had very photogenic board members. All right, everybody smile. We're going to take 2 photos, just like John Blum taught me. All right, 1, 2, 3. Look at your camera. Oh, smile. All right, let's do one more. All right, on the count of 3. 7, 15, 25, 4, 3, 2, 1. Smile. All right. I think that should do.
Jonathan knows I have to be tricked into smiling.
Let's see how. Well, I definitely have the resolution advantage over all of you. I think they're both pretty good. So
Can you share your screen?
Sure. Here, I'll.
These mug shots look like.
All right, let's share. That's really dumb that it. Have I mentioned I have a big monitor? Because I have a big monitor.
That looks good. Wow.
So do I.
That's
I can
good.
see both images. Yep.
Yeah, it's fine.
At least my chessboard shows good. Come on, Moon
Are
Globe.
we happy with that? I think they both look pretty good.
I think so.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All righty.
Thank you. All right.
My reverend base. Yeah, great.
Yep. Great job, everybody. Thank you. And
Thank you.
have a good night.
Okay. You too.
Good night.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Good
Good night.
Happy
See you.
holidays.
Bye-bye.
Well done,
Holidays.
Diane. Well done.
Yes,
Thank you, Dale.
Diane.
Yeah, great job.
Hopefully we'll have a better year next year.
Yep.
Yep. Indeed.
Agreed.
The good thing is
Hopefully
that shouldn't be
Michigan
hard.
next year.
All righty.
All right.
See you next time.
Yep.
See you. Bye-bye. Good night.
Good night,
Thanks.
all.
Good night.
Congrats to the old.
I hope Gary Ross saw this hat at least, you know.
At least there's
Fingers
going to be a
crossed.
record of it in the WASP.